In the vast silence of the frontier, desperation is a constant wind. But hope is a stubborn seed, waiting for a single drop of kindness to take root. Dakota Territory, 1882. The sun was a merciless hammer on the parched prairie. The stagecoach lay on its side like a great wounded beast, its rear wheel shattered, its axle snapped. For Annalise, a woman from the east, with eyes the color of a spring sky, the journey had ended abruptly in this vast, empty land. She was a mail-order bride, bound for a town named Redemption and a man she had never met. Now, she was alone, her fine traveling dress stained with dust, the silence broken only by the ceaseless wind that whispered through the dry grass. Her world had shrunk to this single, terrifying moment of utter isolation. Then, a figure appeared on the crest of a low hill, silhouetted against the unforgiving sun, a rider. As he drew closer, her heart froze in her chest. He was a Lakota warrior, his face a mask of stoicism, a bow clutched in one hand. His dark eyes scanned the wreckage, then settled on her. She saw no emotion in them, no pity, no malice. He was simply a part of this wild land, as elemental as the rock in the sky. She clutched her small traveling bag, every tale of savage raids and frontier danger screaming in her mind. He was the embodiment of all her fears. The warrior slid from his pinto horse in a single fluid motion. His name was Hakan. He did not smile. He did not speak. He walked toward her, his moccasins making no sound on the hard earth. Annalise held her breath, unable to run, unable to look away. He stopped a few feet from her, his gaze taking in her impractical shoes and pale face. He saw not an enemy, but a creature hopelessly out of its element. Slowly, so as not to startle her, he unhooked a water canteen from his saddle and held it out to her. The gesture was simple, direct, and utterly unexpected. She stared at the canteen, then at his unreadable face. Her thirst was a fire in her throat. After a long moment, her trembling hand reached out and took it. He watched her drink, his expression unchanging. Then he produced a strip of dried bison meat from a pouch at his side and offered that as well. It was only then that he spoke, his voice low and calm, like the rumbling of distant thunder. "The sun is not kind here. You must eat." With those words, a fragile truce was struck, a silent understanding under the immense and indifferent Dakota sky. Hakan could not leave her to the prairie. He had seen the circling vultures in the distance, a patient, ominous promise. He gestured for her to follow, and the long walk began. He would lead her to the St. James Mission, a small outpost of faith nestled in a river valley 2 days distant. He moved with an easy, ground-covering stride, while Annalise struggled to keep pace, her city shoes ill-suited for the rough terrain. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the things they did not know about each other. He was a mystery, a protector she had every reason to fear. The journey became a classroom. He taught her without lectures, his lessons delivered in quiet gestures and a few sparse words. He showed her how to read the tracks in the dust, the subtle language of the wild. He pointed out a plant with a pale, fleshy root that was safe to eat. Annalise, who had only ever known food served on fine china, watched his strong, capable hands dig into the earth. She was a student of survival now, and he was her unwilling teacher. She saw not a savage, but a man who understood the world in a way she never could. On the second day, the sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind grew teeth. Hakan led her to a shallow cave, carved into the side of a bluff, a natural shelter from the coming storm. As the rain lashed down outside, they sat in the dim light, a strange and silent pair. She watched him stare out at the deluge, his face calm, accepting. He was a part of the storm, not a victim of it. In the protective gloom of the cave, her fear finally began to recede, replaced by a quiet, burgeoning respect for this man who moved with such dignity through a world that terrified her. She finally found her voice, her question a whisper against the drumming of the rain. "Why are you doing this, helping me?" He did not look at her, his gaze fixed on the gray curtain of water. After a long moment, he replied, his voice soft. "The land does not care if your skin is red or white. It takes the weak. To leave you would be to help the land take you. It is not our way." The simple honesty of his words chipped away at the wall of prejudice she had built around her heart. He was a man of honor, and she was ashamed of her fear. The St. James Mission was a collection of sturdy, humble buildings, a small bastion of hope against the wilderness. A man with kind, weary eyes and shoulders, stooped by the weight of his calling, met them at the gate. He was Reverend Blackwood. He looked at the unlikely pair before him, the Lakota warrior and the disheveled woman in a ruined dress, and his expression showed only welcome. "You have traveled far," he said, his voice gentle. "Come inside. You are safe here." Inside the mission's small infirmary, the Reverend brought her a cup of hot tea. Hakan remained outside, a silent sentinel near the gate. He would not enter the house of the white man's God, a place that held too many ghosts for his people. Annalise understood his hesitation. She sat on a simple wooden cot, the warmth of the mug seeping into her cold hands. The quiet and the sense of security were almost overwhelming. She was a world away from the drawing rooms of Boston, and a world away from the man she was supposed to marry. With the Reverend listening patiently, her story came tumbling out. She told him of her journey, of being a mail-order bride for a Mr. Sterling, the wealthiest man in the town of Redemption. She lowered her voice, her shame and fear mingling. "At the last stop, I overheard the drivers. They spoke of him, his coldness. They said he was a cruel man who believes he owns the town and everyone in it. They spoke his name with fear." She looked at the Reverend, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I could not go to him, I could not." Reverend Blackwood's kind face grew somber. He nodded slowly, his gaze distant. He knew the name Sterling. "Your fears are not unfounded, my child. Mr. Sterling is a powerful man, and his reputation precedes him. He has brought some prosperity to Redemption, but it has come at a great cost to many." He sighed, a deep, troubled sound. "He is not a man who takes kindly to being denied what he believes is his." The Reverend's words confirmed her worst fears. She had not escaped her fate, she had merely postponed it. 3 days later, a rider approached the mission. He was a hard man, with a cruel twist to his mouth and a proprietary air. He did not dismount but surveyed the humble mission grounds with a look of disdain. It was Pike, Mr. Sterling's foreman. He spotted Annalise near the well and spurred his horse forward, stopping so close she could smell the sour scent of whiskey on his breath. "I am looking for property belonging to Mr. Sterling," he rasped, his eyes cold and assessing. "A mail-order bride, paid for in full." His words were a brand, marking her as chattel. Pike reached down from his saddle, his hand a claw aiming for her arm. "You will come with me now. The boss is not a patient man." Annalise flinched back, her heart pounding against her ribs. Before his fingers could touch her, a shadow fell between them. Hakan had moved with the silence of a hunting cat. He stood before her, unarmed, his hands loose at his sides. He said nothing. He did not need to. His presence was a wall, his gaze a shard of ice that stopped Pike's hand in mid-air. The air crackled with a sudden, dangerous tension. The few mission residents who were outdoors froze, watching the silent confrontation. They were caught between their fear of Sterling and a sudden, fierce admiration for the lone warrior who dared to stand against him. Pike's face contorted with fury and a flicker of uncertainty. He looked from Hakan's unyielding face to the nervous onlookers. To force the issue here, against a Lakota warrior, could ignite a fire he was not prepared to handle alone. His hand slowly retreated. The silent battle of wills had been won without a single blow. Pike gathered his reins, his face a mask of cold fury. "This is not over," he snarled, his words directed at Annalise but his eyes locked on Hakan. "Mr. Sterling does not like thieves, and he does not like people who shelter them. He will have what is his." He wheeled his horse around, kicking up a cloud of dust as he galloped away. His threat hung in the air long after he was gone, a poison that seeped into the fragile peace of the mission. Annalise knew then that this was no longer just her fight. She had brought danger to these good people. Annalise found a purpose at the mission. She began assisting the old physician, Dr. Evans, a man whose mind was still sharp, though his hands trembled with age. She had a gentle touch and a calm demeanor that soothed the sick and injured. She learned to clean wounds, mix poultices, and sit with the feverish through long nights. The work was hard, but it gave her a sense of belonging she had never known. She was no longer just a frightened woman running from her fate. She was becoming a healer, finding her own strength in caring for others. Hakan made his camp in a small cottonwood grove by the river, a short distance from the mission. He kept to himself, but he did not disappear. He would appear at the edge of the mission grounds with fresh game for their larder, or a bundle of medicinal herbs for Dr. Evans. A quiet friendship formed between the old doctor and the Lakota warrior, a bond built on a mutual respect for the healing arts. The doctor spoke of science, Hakan of the earth, but they understood each other perfectly. Annalise watched these silent exchanges with a growing warmth in her heart. She began to learn his language. In the evenings, after her work was done, she would walk to the edge of the grove. At first, he would only nod. Then, she started using the few Lakota words she had learned from Dr. Evans. She would point to the sky and say the word for moon. He would listen, his expression serious, and sometimes offer a soft correction. It was a slow, tentative bridge being built between their two worlds, constructed one word at a time in the twilight, with the scent of wood smoke hanging in the cool air. One evening she found him carving a piece of wood by his fire. She sat nearby, watching the deft movements of his knife. "What are you making?" she asked softly. He held it up. It was a small, detailed figure of a hawk. "A hawk sees far," he said, his eyes on his work. "It sees the snake in the grass. It is good to have a hawk's eyes in this land." She understood his meaning. He was watching over the mission. He was watching over her. The simple carving was a promise, a quiet declaration of his vigilance. One day a fine carriage pulled up to the mission gate, a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. A man stepped out, dressed in an expensive suit, his boots polished to a high sheen. It was Mr. Sterling. His face was handsome, his smile charming, but his eyes were as cold and gray as a winter river. He walked directly to Annalise, who was tending the small mission garden. "Miss Annalise," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "I have come to personally escort you to your new home. There has been a great misunderstanding." He spoke to her with practiced charm, ignoring the dust on her dress and the soil on her hands. He painted a picture of a life of ease and luxury and redemption, of fine dresses and grand parties. "A woman of your beauty and refinement does not belong in a place like this," he said, gesturing dismissively at the mission. But his words felt hollow, his compliments like gilded chains. She could feel the iron will beneath the velvet glove. He was not asking her. He was informing her of the reality of her situation. She belonged to him. When she did not immediately agree, his smile tightened. He turned his attention to Reverend Blackwood, who had come to stand beside her. "Reverend," Sterling said, his tone shifting subtly, "I am a great supporter of charitable works. The supplies for this mission often come through my town. It would be a tragedy if those shipments were to be delayed indefinitely." It was a threat, delivered with the casual cruelty of a man accustomed to absolute power. He was holding the entire mission hostage for her compliance. Annalise felt a cold dread wash over her. She looked at the Reverend's worried face, at the small, vulnerable mission behind him. This was her fault. Sterling saw the fear in her eyes and pressed his advantage. "Do not be foolish, my dear. These people cannot protect you from the world. I can. Think of their welfare. A simple ride with me, and all this unpleasantness will be forgotten." He was a spider, weaving a web of guilt and fear around her, and she was caught in the center, her every struggle only tightening the strands. The tension in the mission became a palpable thing, a constant, low hum of anxiety. Sterling's threat had poisoned the air. One evening, Hakan returned to his camp later than usual, moving stiffly. In the firelight, Annalise saw a long, dark gash on his shoulder. He said only one word, "Cougar." But she wondered if the cougar had a human name. She insisted on cleaning the wound, her heart aching at the sight of his injury. He sat stoically as she worked, her touch gentle and sure, using the skills Dr. Evans had taught her. As she carefully bandaged his shoulder, the silence between them was different. It was no longer a space of caution, but of shared vulnerability. In the quiet of the night, with only the crackling fire for company, he began to speak. He told her of his own family, of the wife and child he had lost to the coughing sickness that had swept through his village, a disease brought by the white settlers. His voice was low, heavy, with a grief that time had not healed. He shared a piece of his broken heart with her, a gift of profound trust. His story unlocked her own. She spoke of her life in Boston, of a once proud family fallen into poverty after her father's death. She confessed that becoming a mail-order bride was not an adventure, but an act of desperation, a last chance to escape a life of destitution. "I thought any life would be better than the one I had," she whispered. "I was a fool." They were two lonely souls from different worlds, their lives defined by loss. In that shared darkness they found a common ground, a deep and resonant connection. As she finished tying the bandage, her hand lingered on his arm. It was not the touch of a healer, but of a woman. He did not pull away. He slowly turned his own hand and covered hers, his skin warm and rough against her own. It was a simple, profound gesture of acceptance. No words were needed. In the flickering firelight, looking into his dark, solemn eyes, Annalisa felt a sense of belonging that was stronger and more real than any promise of a fine house or a wealthy husband. She was home. Sterling made his next move. He did not come himself, but sent the law. The sheriff from Redemption, a man with a tin star and Sterling's money in his pocket, arrived with 2 deputies. He claimed to be searching for a thief, a man who had stolen from a supply wagon. His eyes, however, were fixed on Hakan's camp. It was a clear act of intimidation, a legal pretense to harass and provoke. The mission residents watched with helpless anger as the lawmen ransacked Hakan's meager belongings, looking for a crime to invent. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Annalise saw the worried glances, the fearful whispers among the people who had shown her nothing but kindness. She knew she was the cause of it all. Her presence was a curse upon them. Late one night she sat with Reverend Blackwood in his small study. "I must go to him," she said, her voice hollow. "I cannot let Mr. Sterling destroy this place because of me." The Reverend looked at her, his face etched with sorrow. "Sometimes, my child, the greatest courage is not in sacrifice, but in choosing to fight for a different future." Later, she walked to Hakan's camp. The moon was high, casting long shadows through the trees. She found him watching the darkness, as if he had been waiting for her. "I am putting everyone in danger," she began, but he silenced her with a raised hand. "There is another path," he said, his voice quiet but firm. He spoke of a place his people called the Valley of the Silent Fathers, a hidden sanctuary deep within the sacred Black Hills, a place where Sterling's laws and Sterling's money had no power. "It is a hard land," he warned, his gaze intense. "We would have nothing but what we could build with our own hands. Life would not be easy." He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. "But we would be free." He was not commanding her or persuading her. He was offering a choice, a chance. One path led to a gilded cage and redemption. The other led to an unknown future in the wilderness, with only this quiet, honorable man for a guide. Looking at him, Annalise knew there was no choice at all. "When do we leave?" she asked. They left under the cover of a moonless night. Reverend Blackwood pressed a small, worn Bible into Annalise's hands. "May you find your own promised land," he whispered. Dr. Evans gave Hakan a leather satchel filled with medical supplies. "The body is the same, no matter the language," the old doctor said with a sad smile. There were no other goodbyes. They slipped away like ghosts, leaving behind the small mission that had been their sanctuary, turning their faces toward the dark, looming shapes of the Black Hills. Their journey was not an escape, but a pilgrimage. The journey tested them in ways the prairie had not. They climbed steep, rocky trails where their horses struggled for footing. They crossed swift, icy rivers that threatened to sweep them away. Annalise learned to be tireless, to push past her exhaustion. She felt the softness of her old life burning away, replaced by a resilience she never knew she possessed. With every mile they traveled, the world of Sterling and redemption felt smaller, more distant, like a bad dream fading with the dawn. They found the valley nestled between two great granite peaks, a hidden world of lush grass and whispering pines, protected from the harsh winds. A clear, cold stream tumbled through its center. It was a place of profound peace, untouched and waiting. Annalise dismounted, her boots sinking into the rich, dark earth. She looked at the towering peaks, the endless sky. This was not a place to be owned, but a place to belong. Hakan stood beside her, his face serene. They had found the place he had promised. They began their new life with the setting of the sun. Their first task was to build a shelter. They worked together, a silent, efficient team. He felled young pines with his axe, the sharp cracks echoing in the quiet valley. She stripped the branches, her hands, once soft and pale, growing strong and capable. Their hands, one dark and hardened by a warrior's life, the other fair and accustomed to fine needlework, worked together to lay the foundation of their future. They were not building a house, they were building a home. Years passed as seasons turned in the high country. The small cabin grew, becoming a sturdy, welcoming home. A small garden flourished under Annalise's care, and a corral held two strong horses. The world outside the valley rarely touched them. A traveling trapper once brought news from redemption. Sterling's empire, built on greed and fear, had crumbled under its own weight after a bad winter and a series of failed investments. He was a ruined man. The news felt like a whisper from another lifetime, holding no power over them. One morning, as the rising sun painted the peaks in hues of rose and gold, Hakan came to her. He held out his hand. In his palm lay a small, smooth riverstone, a hole naturally worn through its center. He had threaded it onto a thin leather cord. "In my tribe," he said softly, "a gift from the heart is the only vow that matters. This stone has been shaped by the water for 1,000 years. It is strong. It is patient. It is eternal." It was their wedding, witnessed only by the ancient mountains and the endless sky. She took the stone necklace and let him place it around her neck. In that moment, she was more his wife than any preacher or contract could have made her. A year later, their son was born, a child with his father's dark eyes and his mother's quiet smile. He was a bridge between their two worlds, a symbol of a love that had defied prejudice and overcome all obstacles. He was the future, born in a place of freedom and peace, a child who would never know the fear that had once defined his parents' lives. Annalise taught their son to read from the Reverend's old Bible. Hakan taught him to read the stories written in the clouds and the tracks upon the earth. They built a life not from what they had run from, but from what they had chosen, day after day. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their cabin, watching the stars bloom in the deep purple sky. They had found their peace, not in a town called Redemption, but in the redemption they had granted each other. They had everything: